We've talked a lot here about the two pillars, how they represent forbidden knowledge, how they represent the dualistic God they serve, and how by the merging of opposites they will accomplish the great work and finally put the capstone on the tower they were trying to build and install their hero Nimrod as ruler over this world. This event we're talking about sparked off a war that resulted in the New Babylon, the USA, invading and conquering the original Babylon, Iraq. This may be coincidence or not, but right before we invaded, the tomb of Gilgamesh was found there. Plato says the original Atlantis had pillars of Hercules one had to pass through to get to. This Atlantis also has pillars, but these must be knocked down to access the new Atlantis. They were to be knocked down with the help of the religion of the snake and evil Enoch's antediluvian pillars. This event took place on a very significant date. You see, December 25 is not the birth date of Yeshua. No, it was actually the 9th month on the 11th day. I can't actually say what you would usually say because of that censorship that we're talking about, but the 9th month on the 11th day. In 3 BC, and this was the Feast of Trumpets. Dr. Heiser covers this. I'll link it below if you want to watch it, but the eternal counterfeiter who is reaching the end of his time wishes to birth his own creation, the beast system and the false Christ. So what better day to do it than the inverse of the real Messiah's birthday? The 9th month, 11th day, 2001, Gematria, 2 plus 1 is 3, so the original Messiah was 9th month, 11th day, 3 BC. This new system is birthed 9th month, 11th day, 3. It is the inverse. And this is exactly what happened that day. We're told that 19 men with small knives overcame the world's most secure airspace and military apparatus. And on this day, Satan made a covenant with the beast system. You see, on Mount Sinai, when God made a covenant with the Hebrew people, 3,000 lost their lives due to disobedience with the golden calf in the face of God. And at Pentecost, 3,000 were saved. And on this day, the contract with Satan was signed with the blood of 3,000 souls. Leading up to this event, the Republican Party, in power at the time under Bush, did this. They never explained why the stars were turned upside down. And they put out this document called PNAC, Project for a New American Century. 1 year prior to this event, in this document they called for a new Pearl Harbor that would need to happen in order to enact a global control objective of the United States. It also says later biological weapons would be used. And if we look at the footprint of these towers, guess how they were aligned? Yep, back to Orion. And the height of the Great Pyramid, its uncompleted capstone is equal to the first distance up of the World Trade before there is a break in the building. And we can also see that this 911 is the same numerological date as the destruction of Solomon's temple and Herod's temple. Tisha B'Av. This, in Roman numerals IXXI, is hidden in plain sight in the craft, in the Star of David, which is actually the hexagram. Hex means evil, right? It is not actually associated with Judaism. And with the Society of Jesus, or Jesuits. The day before this event, Donald Rumsfeld announced that trillions of dollars had gone missing. And the aircraft that hit the Pentagon wiped all this information out so that they could not trace back where that money went to. This event was openly spoken of on live TV exactly 11 years prior by Mr. CIA 1,000 Points of Light, Daddy Bush, during the State of the Union, where he announced, "Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order." And if you sum up buildings 1 through 7, the height in feet is 6,660 feet. As the attacks actually occurred, President Bush was in a class where the kids were chanting this.
Get ready. Kick. Yes, kick. Get ready. Steal. Yes, steal. Get ready. Play. Yes, play.
And he was reading a story called My Pet Goat. Entire books have been written about the numerology and ritual that day and how it closely resembles an Aleister Crowley ritual. I'll briefly go over a few anomalies. So the flights that were taken control of and crashed were Flight 11. Let's see what Crowley has to say about that. 11 is the number of magic in itself. It is therefore suitable to all types of operation. It is the sacred number par excellence of the new aeon, as it is written in the Book of the Law, dictated by Lamb Iowas. 11 as their numbers who are of us. The next flight is 77. Let's see what Crowley has to say about that. The sublime and supreme septenary in its mature magical manifestation through matter, written in Hebrew, Ion Zion, OZ, Capricornus, the devil of the tarot, which is the picture of the goat of the Sabbath on an altar. 77 also represents half of the formulation of sexual magic in both the OTO, which is Crowley's religion that he carried on, and the Kabbalah. It is also the 77 infernal names of the devil in the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey. 93 is the next flight. The Kabbalistic gematria values of the Greek words thelema, which is his religion, Crowley's religion, of will, agape, love, and Iowas, in Crowley's magical system equate to the number 93. The matter is of extreme importance because Iowas, in dictating the Book of the Law, repeatedly makes use of correspondences in Greek such as thelema, will, 93, agape, love, 93, 718 equals stele 666, and so on. Thus his own name is spelt in Hebrew, has the value 93. 175 was the other plane. Liber 175 in Crowley's magical system is a ritual used to invoke any deity by adoration. There are three main methods of invoking any deity. The first consists of devotion to that deity, being mainly mystical in character. They may not be dealt with in this place, especially as a perfect instruction exists in Liber 175. The second method is the straightforward ceremonial invocation. The third method is the dramatic and perhaps the most attractive of all. Certainly it is, for it appeals to his imagination through his aesthetic sense. Taken together, the flights mean an invocation of a deity, which is associated with magic, Iowas, and Satan. Flight 77 hit the Pentagon, which is 77 feet tall, on the 77th meridian, crashing 77 minutes after takeoff. George H.W. Bush, who announced the New World Order 11 years prior, was 77 at the time of the attacks. And there was a plane flying above the Pentagon as this happened, and guess what the call sign of this plane was? Venus 77. Again, Venus is the pentagram, or the middle of the Pentagon. Flight 11 hit floor 93. Also, the only K9, K is 11, so there's another 911, who died on that fateful day, was named Sirius. And again, to the Egyptians, Sirius was the dog star. Sirius was dog number 17. 17 in the tarot is the star, which according to occultists depicts the star of Sirius. Again, there's entire books written about this, and if you want to know more, you can check those out. So after these twin pillars were knocked down, they put up a tribute in light, and this tribute in light had 88 xenon bulbs, 44 on each tower. 4 plus 4 is 8, 4 plus 4 is 8. Again, remember that these 8s are representative of the sun and moon. So even as the towers are knocked down, their memorial is this duality of the sun and moon in lights. These twin pillars were torn down and replaced with one in the middle, called the One World Trade Building. The design of this has opposing triangles up and down, the as above so below merged into one building. If you look at this building, it is 2 towers. One stays, the other placed on top and rotated slightly, as you can see. This One World Tower is literally the tower of the merged opposites in one. If we look at the view from the bottom of this tower looking up, it's very reminiscent of the Great Seal. And this One World Tower is 1,776 feet tall. They'll say this is because America was founded in 1776, but there is a organization of the Illumined Ones, which was also founded in 1776. In fact, George Washington himself in 1798 said, "It is not my intention to doubt that the doctrine of the Illumined Ones and the principles of Jacobinism had not spread to the United States. On the contrary, no one is more satisfied of this fact than I am." Adam Weishaupt founded the Bavarian Illumined Ones May 1st, 1776. The next part of their plan was to be unveiled when the stars aligned, so to speak. Remember the 19-year Metonic cycle making up the lunar calendar of the Babylonians, Greeks, and Pharisees? When the sun and moon again came into sync, or merged, this is when the next phase took place. Maybe we wouldn't mind a new order if it was to protect us. Meanwhile, sometimes the cure is worse than the disease, both of which were cooked up in alchemical labs. And this is the actual original design for the third pillar. It was somewhat modified, maybe because this was a little too on the nose. The Voyager mission in 1981 took a photograph of the North Pole of Saturn, which revealed a perfect hexagram, which is a representation of a cube rotated. Saturn is the 6th planet from the Sun, and to the Romans he was envisioned with a sickle or scythe of Father Time, a remnant of the agricultural implement of Kronos Saturn, and his aged appearance represents the waning of the old year with the birth of the new. He was a god of wealth, and the Temple of Saturn in the Roman Forum housed the state treasury. Under Saturn's rule, humans supposedly enjoyed a bountiful time of fruitful harvests. The revelries of Saturnalia were supposed to reflect the conditions of the lost mythical Golden Age. Osiris, Pan, Attis, Cybele, Saturn, all of these seem to be depicting a castration, and the obelisk is a representation of this. As we get further into this video, it will become apparent that they are trying to resurrect Saturn so that he can reign again. Coincidentally, we see George Washington with a red cloak, also on top of a black cube. The Washington Monument, named after him, is an obelisk, and we see statues of him in the Baphomet pose. The occult loves the as above, so below. As Saturn is the furthest reach of the solar system, the Gnostics believe trapping our souls here, it is simultaneously the furthest reaches of the pit below us.
And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon.
Revelation 9:11 tells us who Saturn is, the king of the bottomless pit, Abaddon, Apollyon. I'm going to put on the screen an excerpt from The Second Coming of Saturn by Derek Gilbert again, that summarizes his case that this entity is actually Saturn and not Satan. But before he is released, the Antichrist reigns first, also ascending from the bottomless pit, riding or emerging from Leviathan, coming up from the Apsu, the abyss watery underworld. Satan, prince of this world, gives him his power and authority. The myth is the same amongst the snake religions of Babylon and Egypt, where the pre-flood fallen angel religion flourished, and it persisted among other cultures where these mystery schools filtered down through. It is the story of the dying and rising sun god. It is Tammuz to the Babylonians. To the Egyptians, it is the story of Osiris dying and going to the underworld to be reborn as Horus. Saturn, Abaddon, being reincarnated, inhabiting a man reigning in the land of the living, symbolized as the sun. Obelisks symbolize the drawing up of the seed from the underworld to inhabit the God-man on earth, Horus. It is all the religion of Nimrod, the first Antichrist figure. And that's what the Tower of Babel was. It was a portal to draw up the seed of Abaddon to inhabit a man to rule the entire world, and connecting to heaven for war against God. This is the New Age, the coming Aquarian Age, ruled by Saturn. Crowley's Aeon of Horus. The mystery religions carried on this occult knowledge through the millennia, and it's culminating right now. Just as they sullied Christ's birthday by placing it on the solstice, the birthday of the sun god and Saturnalia, they also took his true birth date of 9/11 and used it as a ritual to bring in this new age, ruled by the substituted Christ, the Antichrist. William Morgan printed this expose of Free M. He was killed shortly after this book came out. In the 17th degree, under the chapter of the Rose Croix, the degree of the Knights of the East and West, named after the Templars, says, quote, "Sign for entering the lodge. Place your right hand on your brother's forehead. He will do the same. Sacred word, Abaddon." A Free M website describes this degree as a symbol of illumination and enlightenment, as a divine union between man and God. It is symbolized by two interlocking triangles, is associated with Osiris, the god of death and rebirth, and describes it as a journey from darkness to light. This cube, this double interlocking triangles, this IXXI, is all leading to this event. This event happened on the same numerological day as the day Solomon's temple and Herod's temple were destroyed. There were some individuals who were dancing who were said to have been sent to document the event. These people were let go shortly after being captured by the FBI. A third building also fell. It was called the Solomon Brothers Building. I'll let you look this up yourself, but there was some strange connections to a art group called E-Team. This third building, built to replace the two that were knocked down, is literally a combination of the merged opposites. The double rectangular tesseract, when combined, it does form this higher dimensional cube, this octagon, this 8-sided hypercube. This is an actual article from the official CDC. They have, in reference to the Corona V, a sun god with the corona, the sun symbol, on his head, riding a horse among 3 other horses. The Antichrist, sun god, is going to be riding the white horse among the 4 horses of the apocalypse. And that is the 2 definitions of corona. It has to do with a envelope of the sun, as well as a crown. The rider of the white horse is said to carry a bow and is given a crown to conquer. This word bow is actually toxon, from the Greek toxikon or pharmakon. And we know that in Greek mythology, Apollo is acknowledged as the source of health and healing. He is the first god addressed in the Hippocratic Oath, and the father of Asclepius, the god of medicine. And if we look at the Sun Tarot card, it is the 19th trump card, and it has a child on a white horse with the sun. It's very, very interesting to look at the Operation Warp Speed logo. We have the rays of the corona with the Corona V. In the background is a cube, and this is not any ordinary cube. This is the Antakarana. It's a Sanskrit term that means internal instrument. It has been called the bridge between the middle and higher mind, the reincarnating part of the mind. According to H.P. Blavatsky, it is an aspect or function of the lower mind and retains its initial purity, active whenever there is spiritual aspiration. Therefore, it is a bridge or path that acts as a two-way communication. It's also made up of 3 Vavs, which is the 666. Another completely bizarre thing is that Space Command was re-established because of Trump's creation of Space Force. It was re-established mere months before the pandemic broke out. Incredibly, it was originally established exactly 32 years before the Revelation 12 sign happened. Another bizarre coincidence, the second leg of the X eclipse occurs exactly 120 years from when Crowley established contact with Lamb, the first modern depiction of a gray alien. And this formation of Space Command and Space Force reminds me of what Carol Rosin was told by Nazi scientist who helped fund NASA, Wernher von Braun, that space-based weapons would be established, followed by a fake alien invasion.
We have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system, the first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card, the last card, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat. Well, at the time, I kind of laughed when he said asteroids, and when he said extraterrestrials, I knew I wasn't going to deal with that subject.
Another tie-in that actually made this disclosure happen is in one of the COVID bills. There was a provision in there that the government had to release everything they knew about the UFO stuff. And so, now what's interesting about his uncle is he worked for the FBI. And when Nikola Tesla died, his uncle was the one who went in and got all of his paperwork, and he was supposed to go over it and see if there was anything significant that our government could be using. And so it's suspected that he may have learned something, because Nikola Tesla, which, by the way, he was born in an electrical storm. If you don't know much about him, he, along with Edison, had the direct current. Edison hired Nikola Tesla, which had alternating current, which is AC. And he was just a brilliant man. And in his own writings, he said that he believed he was receiving signals from extraterrestrials. And he thought he was getting these signals from Mars and Venus, aliens that were on those planets. And so it's supposed that potentially his uncle had these papers and either copied them or saw what was on them, and or maybe took the papers and didn't give them back to the FBI. But it is supposed that potentially he gave this information to Donald Trump. Werner von Braun, which was a Nazi scientist that in Operation Paperclip we brought over to help with our space program, he wrote a book, and in this book it's about man colonizing Mars. And there's a government, a Martian government, that it says in this book is modeled after or similar to the way the Catholic Church structures their government. And the head person in this government is Elon. His title is Elon. And also below him is 10 heads. And again, if you look at Revelation, we have the Antichrist, which is the little horn, and then under him is the 10 heads. What is Elon Musk trying to do? He wants to colonize Mars. Stanley Kubrick had a hand in staging footage for the moon landing, which, by the way, they named the mission Apollo after the sun god. Again, this was an occult ritual, the merging of the sun god Apollo, which landed with the moon. People also point out how he exposed MK Ultra with A Clockwork Orange, and elite pedo activity with Eyes Wide Shut. He actually mysteriously died after releasing that movie, and the final cut was edited, removing parts of the film that may have exposed too much. There is another film he did that relates to the Saturnian cult directly. Considering what we learned about the occult ritual that has been ongoing, ushering in the beast system, we shouldn't be surprised it took decades to plan and facilitate. In the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, it centers around a monolith. In the year 2001, a guerrilla art project erected a replica monolith in Seattle. Later that year, the towers would be brought down. And Stanley Kubrick, he died 666 days before the year 2001 started. 19 years later, when the Metonic cycle had run a course of again bringing the sun and moon back together on the calendar, the next major stage of the ritual commenced, and the first CV case in America was located in Seattle. Again, mysteriously, as the shots were being distributed, which were fashioned like the One World Trade Tower, merged opposites of sun and moon, monoliths again began to be seen around the US and the world. Some really weird stuff happened in 1968. This is when the Club of Rome was founded. They released their depopulation booklet called The First Global Revolution, with the 8-spoked wheel on the cover surrounding the Earth, which named humanity as the enemy, and has been instrumental in bringing about Agenda 2030, which seeks to implement many goals to control humanity and reduce the population. Sitting front row at the 2001 ritual was a Hilton building that was admittedly built to resemble the monolith, according to their website. And look at their logo here. Does that not look like a portal being opened up with those two towers? We need to note here that in Arthur C. Clarke's book, which director Stanley Kubrick turned into 2001: A Space Odyssey, the monolith was originally supposed to be the cube. The destination of the spaceship was also Saturn, but it was changed. Some believe it was changed because it was revealing a little too much about the cult and their plans. We've already seen what Mecca represents, but can you believe that the memorial for the two towers that got knocked down actually are a mirror copy of Mecca? And they also have the black cube within a cube, even with the Apsu of waters flowing down into the underworld being represented. Arthur C. Clarke also went on a rant about how they celebrated the millennium in the wrong year, because they started the BC to AD with year 1 instead of year 0. So he argued that 2001 was actually the new millennium. And this is the new year in Egypt because this is when the dog star, which Isis represents, Sirius, is said to rise, and this is when the Nile floods. And she is said to bring up Osiris, which is represented as Orion, up into the sky at this time, called the helical rising. Again, even this memorial is fashioned like a popular Saturnalia game in the most ancient of Roman Christian calendars that also gives the earliest reference to Rome's influence of sun worship being blended with the early church via celebrating Christ's birthday in the Julian calendar solstice of December 25. This is the game that is depicted in that manuscript, and it shows 2 dice and a tower. It was said that the people celebrating Saturnalia would go home and play games, this dice game being one of them, which was based on this other Roman game. I'll show the picture here, but you can see this familiar symbol with the top and the bottom merging in the middle to form that merged opposites, and a 666 on each side. If the memorial does represent dice, then it is snake eyes. And again, the towers were lined up according to Orion's belt, as were the pyramids. And the AI that takes control of this ship is called HAL. It probably refers to IBM in one sense, as it's a 1-letter shift. Again, IBM did work with the Nazi Party, as did the Bush's grandfather. And again, George H. Bush spoke of a new world order coming to be exactly 10 and 11 years before the event. And this AI was described as the 6th member of the crew. AI, if you substitute letters and numbers, is equal to 19. And again, remember the 19-year Metonic cycle. 2001 plus 19 is 2020. And that's when the pandemic occurred. And interestingly, the Metonic cycle, when mapped out, it is also the cube within the cube. We should note that 2001: A Space Odyssey was released in the same year as the groundbreaking of the first tower, 1968. That is also when the term corona virus was coined, based on how under an electron microscope its crown-like surface resembled the sun's outer layer called the corona. And again, that's when the Club of Rome was established, which had an eye on depopulation. And in 2001, A Space Odyssey, there was a fake pandemic story put out to cover the fact that they just made contact with aliens.
With artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. You know those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram and the holy water, and he's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon. Didn't work out.
I take it there will be no HAL 9000 going up to Mars.
HAL 9000 would be easy. It's way more complex than, it would put HAL 9000 to shame. Yeah. Sounds like a puppy dog.
From beginning installation to start of training in 19 days, which is the fastest that anyone has ever gotten a supercomputer to train.
And is that in that new building off to the side?
That's in Memphis, actually.
It's in Memphis?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's where you were?
Yeah.
I see.
Memphis,
okay.
The capital of ancient Egypt.
Right. Yeah, you're bringing what?
Perhaps that's where our new God will come from.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Yeah, I wish that was funny. Yeah, okay, so I want to talk to you about alignment.
I wish that was funny.
Yeah.
Right. It's easy to see that the Roman Catholic Church would align with an empire that fashioned itself as a resurrection of the Roman Empire, the Nazis. America itself designed its architecture, political system, art, and elements of the capital after the Roman Empire. With the Roman obsession with Saturn, it is no surprise America, mimicking Rome, also associated itself with Saturn. On the dollar bill and the Great Seal, the eagle has 13 arrows, signifying war, and 13 olive leaves signifying peace, the duality. The banner, which again is from the Zeus Aquila, reads, "From Rome's official language of Latin in 13 letters, out of many equals one," followed by the hexagram above the Satan eagle, symbolizing Saturn made up of 13 smaller stars. Together they make the 14th star, the Star of Saturn. It is the same as the magical capstone on the pyramid, the 14th piece of Osiris that was missing, resurrected from the underworld using magic. The other Latin sayings on the bill are, "He approves of our undertaking," and "New Order of the Ages." Who approves of the undertaking? To take many and make one, into the New Order of the Ages. The motto was coined by Charles Thomson in June 1978, in which he adopted it from a 1st century BC Roman writer called Virgil's Eclogue 4, in which Virgil refers to Cybele, who prophesied the fate of the Roman Empire. Quote, "Justice returns, old Saturn's reign, with a new breed of men sent down from heaven. Only do thou, at the boy's birth, in whom the iron shall cease, the golden age arise. The age's mighty march begins anew. Now come the Virgin, Saturn's reign again. Now from high heaven descends a wondrous race. Thou, on the newborn babe, who shall end that age of iron, bid a golden dawn." Unquote. A new race from heaven to rule over the whole world, a new golden age. This sounds like what the Nazis were trying to accomplish with eugenics and the Aryan race, a race from the star people. The worship of Saturn has been hidden in plain sight for centuries by this church. One more symbol we'll look at that's used by this church is the double-headed eagle. When you trace this back, it goes all the way back to the Hittite civilization, and it is an emblem for Ninurta, the son of Enlil, which is also Saturn. So this bird is a representation of the son of Saturn, Ninurta. It's been used by the Holy Roman Empire, the House of Habsburg, then the Russians, and the Nazis. This double-headed eagle represents the two heads of Saturn, Saturn and his son.
To me, a very big thing, $500 billion Stargate project. I think it's going to be something that's very special. It'll lead to something that could be the biggest of all. So, Larry, maybe we'll start with you.
I think things we're working on, again, using the tools that Sam and Masa are providing, is a cancer vaccine. It's very interesting. It turns out, I'll be quick, all of our cancers, cancer tumors, little fragments of those tumors float around in your blood. So you can do early cancer detection. If you can do using AI, you can do early cancer detection with a blood test. And using AI to look at the blood test, you can find the cancers that are actually seriously threatening the person. So we can, again, cancer diagnosis using AI has the promise of just being a simple blood test. Then beyond that, once we gene sequence that cancer tumor, you can then vaccinate the person, design a vaccine for every individual person to vaccinate them against that cancer. And you can make that vaccine, that mRNA vaccine, you can make that robotically, again, using AI in about 48 hours. So imagine early cancer detection, the development of a cancer vaccine for your particular cancer aimed at you, and have that vaccine available in 48 hours.